All right. That is way too loud. Hey, Matthew, will you bring me down just a smidge? Hey, I'm going to pray for us. And then while you guys eat, we are going to have Maddie Shaw and Susanna McConnell just come up here and just share a little bit more about Student Leadership University, which is something that in the last year or two has been new in our youth program. We've been sharing that with you here and there. Corrine Dyer, who is not here, she's leading worship up in the high school room, oversees that. But we went in January, and I know that we kind of gave a report on everything God did. I did want to talk about this. Everyone's asking, like, how can I pay? We're only putting that up there because we have been serving all these pancakes and food for dollar dinner, and I think we did it for $3 instead of $1, but we thought, hey, what if we killed two birds with one stone, parents and students? But feel free. I know people have asked, how can you give towards their trip again in July? I know it seems shady that is my Venmo, but our youth group doesn't have a Venmo. So, but if you have cash, that's great. There's little bowls on the table if you want to put something in there. Please don't feel like you have to. This is just overflow of the food that we made for upstairs. But I did want, again, just to kind of have Maddie and Susanna, you guys can come forward, just kind of share what God has still been doing in their hearts since that trip, and what they'll be doing in July. We have that same group that was in Orlando is now going to Washington, D.C. for SLU 201. So they did 101 in Orlando, which was a certain type of material and curriculum. There you go. And now the next step would be 201 in Washington, D.C., where they get to hear from some of the greatest leaders in all the world. Will be at this conference. So we'd love for each of you to maybe take 2 or 3 minutes just to kind of share what God really taught you on that trip and what life has been in the last few months since being there. You can come this way. You can stand in the light.
Hi, I am Maddie Shaw. So I was able to go to SLU this past January. And I think the first thing I want to say is that SLU was life-changing. I was able to learn about myself as a person and how I can use the gifts that God has given me to lead other Christians in a Christ-like way with a Christ-like mindset. And it was really cool to just learn in that way. I think one of my biggest takeaways was, it was just this quote that I think Dr. J said, and it was that you will never be a good leader if you're not willing to be led first. What you do today determines your tomorrow, and your dreams determine your destiny. And it just made me think that every leadership team has all these different people, and they are all gifted in different ways, and they're all working towards a common goal. So you're going to have, the people that are serving in the background, which would be me, who doesn't want to be out, in front of people, just kind of serving in the background. But then you're going to have the people that are getting up in front of everybody or leading in the obvious ways, and realizing that no matter who you are and what you are gifted in, you can lead, and the Lord is going to use you. So I would just encourage you guys as parents, definitely consider it for your kids. It was just an amazing experience learning the tools that God has given me to go forth and be a good leader in a Christian way. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I'm Susanna McConnell. I did not want to go to SLU. I went because it got me a scholarship for college, and I didn't want to go super far away from home for a week. But I forced myself to do it because of money reasons for college, and it changed my life like I think anybody that went on the trip would say it did. One of the teachers, he's the vice president of the Student Leadership University, Brent Crow, taught on swallowing the big frog first, which is basically doing the hardest thing first. And then one, it teaches you mental toughness and how to do hard things, but then it also makes the next steps easier. And that was a huge takeaway for me. I catch myself saying it to my family all the time. My sister probably hates me, but it really stuck with me how he was talking about that as Christians we have to be countercultural, and that's a hard thing. And a lot of times that's swallowing a big frog, especially for someone who doesn't want to go away from home or someone who doesn't want to lead out in the front of people. And so it was really life-changing for me, and it was different than any like retreat or camp I had done before, because the lessons really lasted past that initial, wow, that was amazing. And I've used them as I've planned work and school and balancing all those things to really do the hard things and try to change the world around me for the better. So definitely, I agree with Maddie. You should definitely think about sending your kids to Student Leadership University. I'm super excited to go in July to the next step, and I hope to finish all the way through. But it was definitely life-changing and worth every penny.
So you can find more information about this on the student tab of our website, everything they did in 101, and then what this team, I think, Susanna, there's 9 of you? Yep, 9 that are wanting to take the next step to 201. So, okay, next thing I want us to jump into is who we have invited to be with us, to hear from. And this is my favorite part of our huddles, is just bringing in outside voices to speak in to parenting, to speak into ways that it can just challenge us as a church body as we're trying to love on our kids, whether young or old. And normally what I try and do is, whether it's through conversations with you guys about, hey, we should invite this person to come, most of them are just through relationships, and most of them are just through listening and watching these people just live their lives day to day. And Matt Nesberg, our pastor of counseling, we probably got lunch, I forget how long ago, and there were some things you were talking about, and it just really pierced my heart. And I thought, man, Matt, I would really love to have you come and bring that to our parents. So I would love for Matt to come and kind of share what God has put on his heart. I would love to leave the floor open to ask any questions or process things with him. I think it's such a great thing that we have our pastor of counseling right here just for you. So really take advantage of that. And then I would love for us as parents just to pray over Matt before he goes. So when I first met Matt Nesberg, I was 14 years old, and Matt was our worship pastor here at our church. If you guys know, Matt was the first kid in our youth group. You're looking at like the kid who birthed the youth group at North Hills. And but when I met Matt, yeah, he was the worship pastor here, and I went to church at Fellowship Greenville, but my band was coming to lead worship in the evening service. And I didn't know much about North Hills, but I knew that it was a fundamental church. I thought it was. I mean, this was 2001, and I was at a Pentecostal church, and I thought it would be funny to wear my AC/DC Highway to Hell shirt. And I was unloading the drums over here, and one thing led to another, and I had to wear my shirt inside out. So there you go. No, but I love Matt. Every time I'm with Matt, I'm either unbelievably challenged or I'm laughing so hard I'm crying. Funniest guy I know. So grateful that you're with us, Matt Nesberg.
Thanks, Tim. I don't remember that story about the AC/DC Highway to Hell shirt, but I have no doubt that you wore it. This sounds like something you would do. Well, I was thinking about what to share, and like Tim said, he and I were having lunch some time ago, and he was talking to me about speaking here, and I said, I don't really know what I would say. And he's like, well, what's God been showing you in parenting lately? And I said, well, this. And he was like, say that. And so that's what I'm going to say. So I tried to write down some notes for myself so that I could kind of keep it together and keep my thoughts going, progressing, because I don't want to take too long. So here's the one statement. I was thinking about this, and I was thinking, probably you're going to go, yeah, everybody knows that. Like, thank you for joining the party finally. But I'm going to say it anyway and go through it anyway, and maybe it will ring for you or remind you of something that's important. So the theme is this. The theme is that influence beats authority, or influence is better than authority. Influence is better than authority. Authority, let me just define those two things, influence and authority. Authority is the power or right to make a decision or to give orders. Authority is the power or right, it's a power to give orders or make decisions, right? Influence is not a power, it's an ability. Influence is the ability to affect ideas or behaviors. It's the ability to affect ideas or behaviors. So authority is power, influence is ability. Now, what does that have to do with parenting? It actually has a lot to do with parenting, especially as our kids age. Because you can give, when it comes to authority, when it comes to control, when it comes to power, you can give any moron power, right? Any idiot can have power, right? You've probably worked for some of them, right? Anybody can have power or authority to make decisions or to exert that control over people. You've seen lots of leaders that have that. But influence creates it or requires skill. It requires patience. It requires a lot of things that are not just anybody can do it. So I am by nature a power guy. I lean towards power, authority, control. That's kind of how I grew up and kind of the way I tend to function. You familiar with Enneagram? I've done all the personality profile things. I've done Strengths Finders, Enneagram, Myers-Briggs, TJT. I've done them all. And Enneagram, I score really high on justice, on what is right, and on power. So what that means, what that looks like in my life is if I see injustice or something that's wrong, and I have the power to correct it, to help make it just, I am right in my wheelhouse. I function at a high level if I have the power to correct justice. So several years ago, I found myself part of a nonprofit organization, and I was serving and began to learn that the leadership was making unethical, in some cases illegal decisions. And all of a sudden, very quickly, I found myself the chairman of the board of directors of that organization, and overnight I had the power to do something about it. And I felt like I was in the perfect place at the perfect time. And it was hard, and a lot of lawyers were involved, and all the things that you can imagine, but I felt like I knew what was right, and I had the power to lead people towards that, and it just felt like I was in my wheelhouse. So that's how I'm created, with power. Well, power is great. It's great in those situations, but it's not always great in parenting. Because in parenting, when it comes to parenting, the power approach has diminishing returns as our kids age. The authority approach has diminishing returns. And for a power guy, that's too bad, because that's the way I'm wired, and wouldn't it be great if I could just keep doing that for the rest of my life? So several years ago, I heard a pastor give a talk about leadership, and he talked about this theme, that influence beats authority or is better than authority. So I just want to share a couple things with you on that. So I'm going to give you 3 thoughts, and then I'm going to talk about parenting a little bit, okay? So here's my 3 thoughts. Kind of contrasting authority and influence. You ready? Authority is transactional, and influence is relational. Authority is transactional, and there's a transaction. You say, Chris, do this, and it's done, right? So, but influence is relational. It requires building trust and care and relationship with a person before you can influence them. Okay, that's the first thing. Second thing, authority is temporary, and influence is long-lasting. So authority is temporary until that person leaves and you're not their boss anymore, or until your kids move out of the house. It's temporary. But influence is long-lasting. It never stops. I bet you if I told you, if you could think of, in the formative years of your life, let's say from 0 to 20, think of one or two people that you feel like really influenced you. Did you think of someone? I bet everyone can think of someone who influenced them. And in some ways, they continue to influence you. I think back on some of that stuff and I think, boy, that thing that I heard or was taught or that way I was shaped continues to influence me. Maybe not 100%, maybe not every day, but it does. Influence never stops. It's long-lasting. And then third, authority is obvious. Influence is mysterious. Authority is obvious. Influence is mysterious because authority relies on clearly drawn lines, boundaries. Don't cross the boundary. The authority says stay in the boundary. Or when you're no longer within the boundary of that person's authority, you're not under that authority anymore. It's very clear. Whereas influence is mysterious. Oftentimes, you don't know how much you're influencing some person until sometimes years later, or maybe never. You don't even know how you influence them. And I bet if you went to somebody and told them, you had a profound influence on my life, in some cases they would say, really? What did I do? Because influence is like that. It's mysterious. Authority is very clear, but influence is mysterious. That's why, on social media they talk about influencers. That's a misnomer. That is, they're actually power brokers. It's actually power, not influence. Because influence is built, it's relational, you often can't see it. That is pure power. Influence is mysterious. My oldest son, Jake, is 15. So I can tell stories about my kids in this room because they're not in here, and they won't be embarrassed. But don't tell them that I told stories on them so that they're not embarrassed. But a few weeks ago, I took Jake to get a haircut, dropped him off, went and ran an errand, came back and picked him up. Went inside to pay, and after I paid, I turned around to leave, and on the other side of the door was an older lady coming through the door. So I pushed the door open and held it so that she could come through, and Jake is standing right in front of me, and he immediately starts to walk towards the door. And I thought that he was headed out the door. And so I put my finger in his chest, and I said, wait. Power move, by the way. And the lady walks in the door, and he looked at me and said, I was going to hold the door for her. I know that. I know what to do. I was headed towards the door so you wouldn't have to hold it, but I could hold it for her. And I was like, oh, shoot. I did not think the best about my own son, but what he had been trained to do by the people that have influence in his life, he was doing. And I didn't know he was going to do it, but he knew it. I didn't have to say, hold the door. He just was going. He was going to go do that. That's the way influence works. It's mysterious that way. You don't see it coming. Now, here's the thing. Every parent will permanently lose authority over their children at some point. If not, the relationship is deformed. The relationship is broken. The relationship can become abuse because power and control is continually exerted over another adult. That's not good. Or it could become codependency. So every parent, all of us, will lose control, lose authority over our kids at some point. Hopefully when they leave the house, we will no longer have that authority on them. So no matter what, I will lose authority over my kids. So I could do one of two things. I can, number one, fight it off as long as possible. I can fight against it. I can push against it. I can try to maintain control and authority for as long as I can until I'm either forced out of it and maybe have damaged the relationship in the process. Maybe they finally cast off my authority and go do their own thing and it's forced away from me. Or the other option is for me to accept it, to encourage it, to try to equip my children for when they do not have my authority, and to, by God's grace, I hope, move myself without them moving me, move myself to a place of not authority, but influence. Because I will not have authority, but I want to have influence for the rest of their lives. That's what I want. If I try to exert constant authority over them, then there's a good chance I will lose authority and influence. But if I willingly can say, I'm going to give up authority at the right time with the hope that I will maintain influence, my hope is that relationally it builds trust with them, I hope, so that I can maintain influence for the rest of their lives. Now, what's hard about that is that means sometimes they do things that you wouldn't do or that you don't like, right? Jake was playing basketball. I guess all my stories are about Jake. I think he just walked by, so he's probably already embarrassed because I'm standing up here. But he played basketball this past fall. Goes to public high school, playing basketball. And he comes home one day and tells us that he quit the team about 75% of the way through the season. Now, Katie and I grew up in homes where you don't quit. Like you finish what you started. So in Strengths Finders, one of the strengths in Strengths Finders is responsibility. It's number 1 for me. Responsibility. It's number 3 for Katie. Which means when you say you're going to do something, you take on that responsibility. You're going to do it come hell or high water. That's what you're going to do. And so when your son says, hey, by the way, I quit the basketball team, it kind of, gets under your skin a little bit. And you don't even know what's going to happen. And so we sat down with Jake, and by God's grace, both of us had the presence of mind to not react to what we wanted to say. We kind of looked at each other behind his head like, I'm going to kill him, But tell me what happened, Jake. And what I found out actually was that not quitting, the ethic of not quitting, was not the most important ethic. Jake quit because some of the older high school kids were just using incredibly vulgar, hurtful language against him. He said, Dad, I couldn't take it anymore. So I just went to the coach and quit. And I said, Jake, I'm on your side. I'm on your side. Because nobody can talk to you that way. And if you ever have an employer that treats you that way, quit. It's better to quit than be abused. It's better to walk away. Always. So, later on, we had the conversation about, hey, by the way, if you ever want to quit something, come talk to an adult first. Come talk to mom or dad or some other adult that you trust and tell them what's going on. Because that's important. Because that's what I want him to remember. I want him to remember 2 things. I want him to remember people can't abuse you. You can walk away. Number 1. And number 2, talk to an adult. Seek counsel. Seek insight. And so my point of sharing that story is I wouldn't have done it that way. I wish in so many ways he wouldn't have done it that way because he actually put his coach who likes him and respects him in a weird place next year if Jake decides to try out for basketball again because he quit without telling the coach ahead of time. So it's this weird place that now the adults are in, like, what do we do now? So, but that's part of trying to move away from control and authority and to influence where our kids will make decisions that are not our favorite. So my point is that I think we have to change our approach. As we parent, as we go through life, we have to move from authority to influence. So that does not tell you how, and I'm not going to, because because that's not really my goal. My goal is not to give you a how-to manual, because there's tons of sermons and talks and books on that. But rather, my goal is because for me, to get that in my mind of when I have a conversation with my kid, that my goal as they age is not to maintain authority. It is to hopefully equip them and me move into a place of influence. I hope. I want them listening to voices of influence in their lives for good. And I think when I was thinking about this, so many times when we're having conversations with our kids, we want to be right. We fight a battle of being right, and we put a chink against losing the war. Like sometimes if we try to win every battle, we're going to lose the war. When our kids were babies, our daughter Molly is super stubborn, like super stubborn. Our boys are really compliant most often, but she digs in her heels, and she's almost 13 now, and she still digs in her heels. And when she was a baby, like 2, one of the best pieces of parenting advice that somebody gave me is, hey, Matt, you got to lose a battle. Be willing to lose a battle so that you can win the war. And I think that's true as our kids get older, that it's okay that we lose battles, but the war, we want to win the war and stay in a position of influence in our kids' lives, and that's what we're going for. And I think you see Jesus do this with his followers, that though Jesus has all authority and power, he doesn't exert that authority and power all the time over his followers. In fact, he entrusts them. He gives them rope, if you will, and lets them run with it and see what happens. He lets them fail, but he continues to influence their lives and maintain that influence in their lives, even after he's gone, because that's what influence does. Influence is long-lasting. It lasts forever. So that's it. I want to have influence in my kids' lives for as long as I am on this earth and even after I'm gone, because I think that influence is better than authority. So that's it. I know that's not rocket science, and it's not amazing, but it's something that I keep coming back to, so I hope it's helpful.
In that world. So if you feel comfortable, I would love for you to come up. If you want to stay in your seat, it's great. I know we're pushing our people, like in church this morning, we made everyone gather and read scripture together. I thought it was so great. I kind of feel like we're coming back into the world where we're okay, we're not doing the spiritual hands and someone's 50 feet away, but that still works. It's nice. It's powerful. Josh, would you mind just coming up and praying? And if we just want to surround Matt, that would be so great. God, we thank you for your Son, Jesus Christ, who even now gives us access to bring Matt before you. To thank you for the gift that he is to us as a body. He is the one who you are using to help us walk out the truths of the gospel. You are one who has used your power and authority to change us, to grow us, to give us a law, and that law leads us to the gospel. And then you work, and you influence, and you change through your Spirit, and you grow us into people that look more and more like your Son.
And so even as we think through what we heard tonight, he gave us a why. Not a how-to, but a why. The way we parent is influenced and shaped and rooted in the gospel. And so we delight in that. We delight in you, Father. You have given us the gospel, but you have given us a good gift in that. And so we pray over him today. We ask that your Spirit would strengthen him for the task that he has, that he would grow in his knowledge of the gospel. He would grow in his knowledge of you, even as the word permeates him and it works itself out in how he disciples his kids, how he loves his wife, how he guides the people that you have put in his sphere of influence. And so we ask that the gospel would be big and glorious in his eyes, and so that he would be so enamored by who you are and what you've accomplished through your Son, Jesus Christ, that that overflows. And even tonight, we feel the splashes of that in your heart. So God, would you continue to do a work in him, and accordingly, joyfully, do a work in us. We ask all these things for your glory and for our good. In your Son's name.
Okay, so to complement what Matt talked to us about is I want to do a fun little exercise together, and hopefully you grabbed this piece of paper when you came in. If not, it's over by the coffee, which, by the way, we have decaf coffee as well, but I was told has bleach in it. I don't know. Sue's Ruby went on this whole tangent on how it's bad for you. Okay, so if you didn't grab it, run over there and grab it. And so I want this to be something fun that you do with the neighbors at your table. So Kirsten, with your your little ones. But here's how I want to set this up, and here's why I thought this was so good and complements what Matt was talking about. So this is called For Adults Who Can Help Shape Your Kids. And so going off of this whole thing of authority and influence, let me give you a little story, a little insight on why I think this is so powerful and why it complements so much of what Matt was saying. So I was a junior in high school. No, I was younger. I was a freshman in high school, and I cut a really gnarly mohawk. Like, it was disgusting. It was gross. I looked terrible. Why my parents let me leave the house, I don't know. But my parents were kind of like, he loves Jesus. He's a good kid. He's getting good grades. If he wants to look stupid in public, let him. We're not going to really die on that hill. And yeah, and so I was grateful for that. But it caused a lot of problems when I went to rehearsal for drums. And I remember leaving feeling so defeated. We keep talking about come as you are. These things don't matter, but clearly something just matters. Like clearly, what I do look like on the outside is now a hiccup. And I remember throwing my drumsticks on the ground and saying a few choice words, and I left, and I was done. Went home, told my dad. Obviously, no one in here has met my parents. They live out in Simpsonville still. It's so great to live close to my parents. My mom, if you meet her, you'll learn really quickly, I fell very close to the tree of Beth. I am my mom, but my dad is very reserved, quiet, doesn't like attention, and when he speaks, you should listen. Just that kind of guy. Like I still don't even really know my dad very well. Like we'll be out to lunch. I'm like, Dad, where were you born? I'm 34, right? And I'm like, oh, how did I not know that? Like, what were your parents' names? Like, and his parents died. Oh man, he was like in his 40s. I was little. He's an only child, so he doesn't have that big of a family. It's just been interesting just to kind of learn my dad now that I'm a parent, and I'm sure you'll be able to enter into fun relationships with your kids. Like when they have kids, the dynamics are pretty neat. But I remember having a conversation with him about a man that was in my life, and his name was Aaron Keys. And so if any of you guys know my story, I threw my drumsticks on the ground, left, super upset. Never wanted to play drums for the church again. I'd rather go play at the Handlebar or at Magnolia Street Pub in downtown Greenville. Like, those are places they don't really care what my hair looks like. And they were telling my dad that. And a week later, I got a phone call from this random guy. His name was Aaron Keys. And he was the worship pastor at a church called Crossroads out in Simpsonville. That church is now called Bridgeway, which is off of Garlington. He's not there. But he was like, hey, dude, I heard you can kill it on the drum set. Is this true? And I was like, yeah, we just had a conversation. He's like, I knew your older brother, Matt. He was 5-6 years older than me, and he was just so kind. And he was like, I would love for you just to come and meet the band and see what we're all about, and, blah, blah, blah. And before I hung up the phone, he goes, hey, one other thing. And I thought he was going to be like, that goofy haircut, buzz it, like before you come. And he said, I want you to take your blue mohawk and spike it as high as you can when you come. And I was like, for real? Okay. And I remember telling my dad, like, hey, this guy reached out to me, and I think I'm going to go. And that forever changed my life, that phone call. So if you guys know my story, freshman year, sophomore year, and junior year, I helped lead worship over there with Aaron. And then I signed with a record contract my junior year and traveled for almost 4 years before going to Liberty under Red Tie Records. And Aaron was one of my main people that I played with. It was under Aaron that I got incredible discipleship. I remember watching Aaron and just thinking, if that is following Jesus, I clearly am not following Jesus. Our lives are just not lining up. And so it's a huge part of my story, but man, this was maybe a year ago. I'm talking with my dad, and how's Aaron doing? And we're just kind of talking and catching up. And he said, you know how Aaron even got involved in your life? He's like, do you remember when you came home and you were so discouraged and crying? He goes, the next morning I reached out to Aaron, and I said, Aaron, will you please call my son? Will you please, bring him under your wings? I know God has created him to play the drums. I know you are the guy to really fix this. I'm not going to go to this other church and try and fight this battle. It's a losing battle. And when he was telling me this, I had no idea that this quiet, introverted of a man, that was probably very hard for Woody Wadsworth to pick up the phone and call. Could have been rejection on the other line. No, I'm too busy. No thanks. Can't. Right? And in that moment, my breath was taken away. I was like, Dad, you got that ball rolling? He was like, yeah. He's like, man, I'm sure glad I did. And it just gave me goosebumps. I was like, Dad, that was like, way to go. And it was really cool. So when Matt was sharing what he was talking about, I've had this, there's 4 adults who can help shape your kids' lives kind of on my computer, waiting to bring this out at an appropriate time. And I would love for us I'm going to read this first paragraph, and then we're going to go through and look at the 4. And I would love for you guys at your table to read the paragraph that describes the type of person that can help influence your kid. And then it seems that on each exercise, it wants you just to take a second in your mind to think of who those people could be. And it's pretty much asking you to be the biggest advocate for your kid. So it says this, as parents, we have a responsibility to provide oversight for our kids regarding who they hang out with and when they hang out. We schedule preschool play dates and park meetups so our kids can hang with their friends, but how often do we consider which adults we want our kids to be around? As you think of being intentional about other adults in your kids' lives, here are 4 types of adults who can influence your kids in positive ways. So I love what it says there, but how often do we consider which adults we want our kids to be around? Like normally we think about yes, friendships in our kids are so important, right? That's a big thing. We should have much oversight. Who are my kids hanging out with? But I think this would be such a good exercise for us as parents to just take a few minutes and say, who are the kids that I should be pinpointing in our church that are killing it in certain areas or that love Jesus and they're just doing really well in this world? And how can that rub off on my kid? And I'm sure we all, as parents, have been saying things over and over and over to our kids, and it just takes one random person to say the exact same thing and it clicks. I have even felt this as a youth pastor. We take our kids to camps. The campus pastor's preaching. 497 kids get saved. And I'm like, I've been saying this for years. Why? But we go to camp, and but that's how God wants to do it, right? Like, I've had so many parents come up and say, hey, Tim, I need you. I need you just to be my mouthpiece. And when my kid says this, I mean, we've done this with Grant so many times. I'm teaching him drum lesson, but there's more. And he looks at me. You talk to my mom? I'm like, nope. I have no idea what you're talking about. Right? Okay, so let's just go through this. The first one, it's challenging us to have influencing our kids. They're calling it the dreamer. And it says dreamers can open your kids' eyes to things they may not see. I have a friend who is currently an assistant coach in the NBA. As I watched him from afar, I knew he had dreamed of coaching in the NBA, and watching his dream come true has inspired me. When we provide our kids opportunities to be around adult dreamers, it teaches them to dream and challenges them to think about their future in new and exciting ways. The balance here is to let them dream, but not be consumed by something they may never achieve. Placing them around adults who have worked hard and seen their dreams come true is a powerful tool. It's a powerful tool. So on the piece of paper, it says list 2 adults that you know are dreamers. That you know are dreamers. Think through that, and then at your table, talk about who that person is and why they came to mind. And maybe you just can't come up with anyone. Well, that's okay. Have those type of people on your radar. So when you see they have this attribute or this quality, you now are going to, a week, 2 weeks, 2 months, whatever, say, hey, I'll give you $20. Will you take my kid out to coffee? I'm telling you, high leaders, the ones that are killing it, are just waiting to be asked. Personally asked. So in our staff meeting on how we're trying to recruit leaders right now in our church, have you seen all these Next Step commercials? Right now, there's this massive push for come and serve. And I keep saying, look, this is fine. We can come up with these hilarious commercials, and we might get some people. But if you want people stepping in and serving, the leaders that are killing it are just waiting to be asked. So George Zitlaw, the guy that passed by, I don't know if you saw him, he oversees our seniors. He used to serve with Keith Hodges, who was the youth pastor 10 years ago before I came. And I remember 4 years into serving, I needed life group leaders. They were low. And I went back and looked at Keith's leaders. I was like, wait a second. 80% of these people that were serving still go to our church, and they're not serving anymore. Huh. That hurts, right? You're like, ouch. Why him? Why not? And I look back on how I was at 25, and I go, that's why. Maybe that's why. But I remember going to George Zitlaw, and I said, George, brother, you were serving with Keith Hodges. I came on board. You left. Why? And he goes, you've never asked me. And I went, you're kidding. Okay. George, would you like to be a life group leader at Alive? And he goes, I'd love to. And I was like, you son of a gun. I was so happy. And I was like, really, George? But George is one of those that, like, if I had 50 of him, I could take over the world. The guy's amazing. So that's how I want to challenge you guys, to push you out of your comfort zone to go after these 4 people. So let's take a 2-3 minute break. Talk amongst yourself. List 2 adults that you know are dreamers. Dreamers. Go ahead. Okay, one more minute. Okay, so I just shared with this table the big takeaway for Dreamer is dreamers can open your kids' eyes to things they may not see. So, an example I gave in the drumming world is I remember getting around certain drummers, and my my teachers at the Fine Arts Center and the Governor's School would always walk up to me and say, "Tim, if you're the best drummer in the room, you're in the wrong room." I liked being in the room where I could show people how to do it. I was better. I could sit behind the drum set and show them, and they saw that in me. And they kept saying, if you are the best drummer in this room, you're in the wrong room. You need to go be with those drummers. And okay. And I would get around those drummers, and then they would open my eyes to things I just didn't know were out there. I was sharing with this table, I remember a drummer saying, hey, did you even know you can be a studio drummer? You don't have to be in a band. I was like, a studio drummer? What is that? And they're like, yeah, it's just a guy who just goes in the studio. And like, it was awesome. These adults opened my eyes to things I didn't know. So I hope that was helpful. Hopefully you were able to think of people that you can go after. The next one I'm so excited about, Darren, you'll probably love this, is the fixer. I thought this was so fascinating. The fixer, having friends that can fix things has two benefits. One, they can help you fix what's broken, and two, they can help your kids learn new skills. Find a fixer that is patient enough to not only help you, but also to teach your kids at the same time. To this day, I remember how to trim hedges because one of my dad's friends once asked me to help him with some landscaping. He patiently showed me how to shape hedges like a pro. Surround your kids with people who are skilled and willing to share their skill. Toby, this is kind of like right up your alley too. Like this is massive. So let's just take a couple minutes. List 2 adults who you know are fixers, and we can even take this one step farther. Like, it doesn't have to be like a fixer of plumbing or a fixer of when something breaks. This is the guy you want to go to. Like, it could even be like a fixer in other things. Like God has given them just the gift of fixing. I think that's really interesting. So just take a second and think through that. The fixer. Okay. The fixer. So the goal here is to get people around your kids with the end goal for the kid to walk away, male or female, and say, wow, I didn't know I was good at that. Or wow, I didn't know I enjoyed doing that. I remember there was people in my life who had to show me how to change a tire. But the goal there was bigger, the patience they showed, the kindness, the time. Like, that is big. But then also hey, maybe I'm pretty good at cars. I might check that out. Or they might walk away and go, I hate cars. No thanks. Like, almost think of the mentality of an internship. Sometimes the greatest thing you can walk away from an internship is, I am not doing that. Right? Like, it might be really big. I can't tell you how many people have gone and gotten a degree to be a nurse, spent lots of money, lots of time, blood, sweat, and tears. Then they became a nurse, and then a year later they were doing something else. I'm like, that was backwards. You should have tried it, just tasted it before you ordered it on the menu. So I think that's a really great thing that you can be doing as parents for your kids. Okay, I love this one. The encourager. It says, I often find myself intentionally encouraging my friends' kids. As an encourager, I genuinely want to affirm great things I see in others, especially in my kids and their friends. It is fun to brag on how awesome kids are in front of their parents. One day while my kids were playing at the park, a few of the boys were not getting along, and I watched one of them restore peace between them. I went over to the peacemaking boy and encouraged him for his great work in resolving the conflict. Then I shared with his dad about his ability to help everyone get along. Both he and his dad were encouraged. I certainly want to surround my kids with encouraging adults that see things in them that I may miss. This is massive. We show a video to our adult leaders, our life group leaders every year about one of the best brain surgeons in all of America is giving this testimony on his career and how he became a brain surgeon, and he attributes it to his like 8th grade science teacher, and the teacher's name was Mr. Sai, and the whole little documentary was going to the school, and the teacher, Mr. Sai, was still teaching. And they did this thing in a chapel where Mr. Sai didn't know that the best brain surgeon in all the world was coming to, and it was so neat because when he went into the room, he goes, Mr. Sai, you may not remember me, but my name is Brandon whatever. And when I was in the 8th grade, we dissected a frog. I took out the spine, and you came over to me and said that was the best spine removal you had ever seen someone take out of a frog. And I have never forgotten that. And I went on to become the top brain surgeon at Duke Medical. And the tears that were coming from Mr. Sai were just huge. All because he walked over and said, that is the best spine removal I've ever seen out of a frog. You have no idea what that could do. I mean, this guy in this paragraph is just being a peacemaker. You could walk over to another parent and go, did you see what your kid did? No. I mean, this happens to me all the time, especially with an autistic kid. I miss it. And kids will walk over, and other teachers, whether it's Sunday school or at Taylor's Elementary, and go, do you know where Judah is unbelievably gifted? No. You should see how he helps others. This kid is a helper. I go, really? All right. How? They're just, it's like driving in the car analogy. You have some blind spots as parents. And there might be someone that's in the passenger seat that can lean over and go, yeah, there's no cars coming. Go. Right? So think about people. I call these people, by the way, this is like Ministry 101. Sunday through Thursday, we in ministry want to be around VDPs, very draining people. That's what I call them. Like, man, when I'm done, I don't leave going, that was great for me. Thank you. Right? I leave and it's like, but because we're around people as shepherds with sheep, Friday and Saturday, I have to be around VIPs, very inspiring people. So that Friday, Saturday is filling my cup so I can hop back in on Sunday and I have something to offer because I'm back around VDPs. And that is not an insult to people in our church. We need something to give, but we leave every day drained. I go home. I mean, people ask Rachel all the time, is he so much fun to live with? And she's like, not really. Because, you all get the best of him, and then when he comes home, he's done, right? And, he's yelling at the kids, and I tell him to go out to the garage, and I'm like, what is wrong, right? So the encourager is big. This is stuff. Listen, the encouragement that I got in youth group, I remember that over anything my youth pastor said from stage. I would walk through the door, and they would go, Tim, dude, we're so happy you're here. And I'd go, you are? Huh. Wow. All right. I remember that clear as day. The encouragement my life group leaders would give me, what other parents would speak into me is massive. So take 2-3 minutes, list 2 adults that you know are encouragers, and then my challenge to you is to get those adults speaking into your kids. Flies. 3, 2, 1, go. Okay. I wish we had more time. I love hearing y'all talk. I'm so sorry. I want to get through this last one. This one is so good. The storyteller. Typically, the storyteller is an adult that's a little older and more experienced in life. Storytelling is one of the most powerful ways we share life together and pass on a legacy. I've made it to a point to ask that all of my kids' grandparents and church grandparents share their stories of past experiences. It's a joy to hear my kids retell the stories they've heard from long ago and how things used to be. This gives them a wider perspective of the world and an appreciation for what they have. An easy win would be to bring your kids to a senior adult event and have them sit and eat lunch with a table of wise adults full of stories. This is awesome. So this was even challenging me. Like, could we do something as a youth group where we partner with Encore, get our kids to go there, rake leaves, take out their trash, do whatever, but then go to those adults and say, hey, before they leave, I want you to be a storyteller with them. You guys remember the Van Slutens? Herman and Ellie? So Herman and Ellie passed away last year, or 2019. I mean, Herman was 98. I mean, he was like running marathons in his 80s. And then Ellie was, but their story, we went, Darren and I have the privilege of one time a month, we do a mobile prayer meeting. And our staff, we love it. We all get in cars and we either go to like shut-ins or people who just, for whatever reason, need us to go to their home. And I went to the Van Slutens, and they have like a real strong, Herman had like a real strong Dutch accent. And he told his story about how he was a prisoner in war. And he was on some boat. And that's where he met his wife. And how it was just, literally, he kept our attention for like 45 minutes. I don't even know if we prayed for him. I don't even know if we had time. But like we went, and I left, and I thought, our kids have to hear this story. I mean, I went home to Rachel. I was like trying my best to like remember it. And so we had them come to youth group like maybe a month later, and we videotaped them sharing their story. And it was very special, like after God called them home to have that. But even in our youth group, if you were to say, hey, a 98-year-old's going to come and you're not going to hear one kid talk, I would have laughed you out of the room. But Herman was a boss, and he did it. So take a few minutes and think, okay, how can this be a win-win? How do I get my kids around these been there, done that, rock star storytelling adults, and how can that help shape my kiddo and how he processes the world? So think about that. Okay. So your challenge as parents, I mean, this is a lot. And your kids are like, why do you keep... So, like, be wise in how you execute, how you advocate for your kid. I just thought this was so good with what Matt was saying with the level of authority and influence. And if we live in that box of influence, yes, we have a role as parents to be executing and implementing that in our families. I just think you're crazy if you're not going outside the box. So hopefully your kids can have the story like I have. I don't know where I would be if Aaron Keyes never called me. No idea. And if I could bore you with more of my story, how that relationship is what opened the door to this relationship. I can even kind of connect the dots on how that got me here. It's just wild. And we need to be doing that for our kids. So anything you guys want to share with us all before I close with one other thing? That's too convicting. I don't want to think of that. Todd, that's so good, brother. So good. Good. All right, last thing I want to do. Did everyone grab one of these surveys? I would love if we end our time, if you would just take 5 minutes, and when you're done, if you could turn it into the table behind Wendy. There's already one that a parent did and slapped it down. I want the huddles to be a place where you can also have your voice be heard. It is a place where we can grow and be stretched and grow as parents. But I hope if my kids were in a youth group, I could have a say or at least have questions into the youth group. I did put a bookmark down. Do people still give out bookmarks? I don't know, but we are. And just be kind to me. Like, if you're going to throw it away, just wait till you get home. Please. But I thought it would be good just to kind of, and the cut job you can tell was done by, I think, a middle schooler we recruited to do this. So mine, the H and A is the only thing showing. But just a reminder, just to remind you guys of what we are all about and what we're teaching our kids is going to be really strong with these habits. And hopefully I sound like a broken record player, reminding you about what we're constantly going to be teaching our kiddos. And so I wanted to give you this. But if you could just take 5 minutes, please be honest. Dawson and I are big boys. We need feedback. I need my leaders and I need my parents to be my eyes and my ears. Sometimes these surveys have had such gold on them that we have implemented that into the youth group. It hasn't been quick and it hasn't been immediate, but sometimes Dawson and I read over this and we go, ouch. Or we say, we are doing that. So maybe we just need to be louder in that world. And then sometimes we see things and it's great, but it's just not for us. And then we can be honest with you guys, just like Chick-fil-A would look at you and say, we love burgers. They're great. We do chicken sandwiches. But if you want a burger, we can tell you where to go. Five Guys is up the street and they kill it. And then at least you know that some of these expectations that you have are just things that we're not going to do. Or we can point you in the direction of who on staff in our church is killing it with that. Because if you look at the I in habits, it's involvement in the church. So if you're like, man, student ministry is just not really paying attention in this world of, let's say, we have parents all the time that are like, why don't we do this? And I go, well, there's only one of me, but there's 18 of them on staff over there, and I bet they're doing it. So let's get involved in the church, kind of thing. Like, I remember a parent was like, we should do a breakfast on, like, Saturday morning. And I was like, well, there's men's breakfast. Let's go to men's breakfast. Like, push over there. But please take some time, fill this out, and this is very valuable to us. So, and if you want to put your name on it, great. If you don't, it's okay. No big deal. So, I would love just to end our time, fill it out when you're done. It's kind of like when you're taking a test, like turn your test in and you can go, kind of thing. Or if you want to stick around. Oh, I do know, does anyone here want to take some to-go boxes of food? Yeah? How many do y'all want? 4? Anyone else? Because they're in the back ready to put it all together. I have 4. Anyone? How many? You want the gluten-free and dairy-free and sugar-free and taste-free? I'm on it. I got it. Okay, 1 gluten-free. How many gluten-free? 2, so 3. Hey, Dale, can we have 3 or 4? Y'all can be filling this out while I'm just yelling. 1 gluten? Okay. That's all you have left? Praise God. That's great. I'm really sorry to get everyone excited. Do we have any gluten-free food? Any gluten-free? Oh, guys, I'm so sorry. I should have checked with the kitchen. Communication fail. Hey, George, we were just talking about you. George Zitlaw, everybody. Okay, fill that out. And then if you want to grab some food, first come, first serve. You can wrestle for it.